on to the February 2020 Policy Council meeting. Thank you all for attending. Looking forward to the business of the evening. It begins with a vote to approve the December minutes from our December meeting that were circulated with the agenda. Because we are on this virtual system and because this is a pretty straightforward set of minutes, I will just open it to ask if there are any comments or corrections on the minutes. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? And Mark, thank you, and a second. And what we'll do is I'm going to assume that the votes are in favor unless there are abstentions or votes against. Please make your voices heard if you abstain or vote against. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is just a quick note because this matter came to Policy Council last semester. Last semester, there was a request by the CUNY Board of Trustees to assess a credit, no credit policy. You'll remember that this matter came to the Policy Council. There was considerable discussion here about it. It also went to Faculty Council where there was a lot of discussion. Wanted to let you know that the Board of Trustees has decided against having a credit, no credit policy across all of CUNY and has requested that, or has suggested that campuses may wish to review their local pass-fail policies. I've informed the Faculty Council of this matter, and as I understand it, the Faculty Council is taking this up, or may take this up, but is reviewing whether to take this up. Also have informed the student government representatives here at Policy Council and requested that if there are suggestions, the time frame is pretty tight on this. The board needs any changes to our documents around pass-fail to go to the CUNY, the appropriate CUNY committees mid to late March. So this is just by way of a note that this matter is not going to come to Policy Council this semester, but that both the Faculty Council and the student government are on notice about this matter. You want to add something? You want to take yourself off mute? There you go.
Just want to report that indeed Faculty Council committees are taking this up. It has already been sent to the relevant committees. I've instructed them to move on this and hopefully to get a motion before Faculty Council if they deem it necessary in the Tuesday meeting. I've asked the students on several occasions already to please send me their suggestions or wants as ASAP, which I will immediately forward to the Faculty Council committees. So I hope they take me seriously. I mean, the faculty, students I know take me seriously. I hope the faculty take me seriously. I've asked them to do it, and they'll do it. If you look, those students who've looked at the pass-fail policy on campus, it's really long. It's like 2 columns in the bulletin. It's complex. There are things in there I think are ridiculous. There are things that I think are important. In any event, I'm not putting in my 2 cents, but rest assured, Faculty Council is considering it at the president's request, and we're waiting to have students have anything to say. If they wait too long, it's going to be too late. So please do it right away. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Yadidja. Yeah, I think that just sort of echoes the call for student government to make suggestions, and you can send those suggestions through Yadidja to the committee, and that would be one way for members of this community to contribute, student members especially, to contribute to a dialogue that will be happening, it sounds like, at the Faculty Council committee level and possibly at the full Faculty Council. David?
Are these to be permanent changes we're considering or temporary?
That is up to the faculty. But if the issue is to be applied this semester, my assumption is, by the way, David, is that there would not be a one-shot, but that is up to the faculty. for the policy revisions, to the extent that there are any, to apply to this semester's grading process, it needs to go through the process pretty quickly. And that's why I would ask student government representatives here to make those suggestions. You can do it through the route of Yadidja himself or to the appropriate committees. All right, so anything else on this matter? This is just by way of notice to folks who are here. Good. Next up, we've got a report out from the Fiscal Infrastructure and Planning Committee. I believe that
That's me.
that Alan chairs that committee. Yes. Alan,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So we had a very good discussion a week or so ago, I believe, on several topics. So we discussed a little bit about the budget and reentry, and there's more to come, over the next several weeks as we learn more from the university. But in terms of our standing items, the one that's the most relevant to this group is we are making progress with the multi-stall all gender bathrooms. All of the signage, I believe, I was told by our Buildings and Grounds team, has been, put up on all the bathroom doors. The president posted something on social media. So look on Facebook if you want to see the examples. We reported out to the LGBTQ Resource Center Committee on that, and I've spoken to Kyle directly as well. I don't know if I don't see Kyle here, but we've spoken. So, and I know we're making progress. We also, as part of our internal working group, Ivana Bologna from Diversity and Equity Office has joined our group. She's been invaluable, and as the Title IX coordinator in terms of guidance related to both the signage and to getting us contacts with the university regarding the bathroom code. She's been a godsend to help us really move forward. And right now the issue we have is we're working with the university on the code for the restrooms to make sure that we do not do anything that will put us in a code violation. We have, as I mentioned previously, the college does have a toilet renovation project in the queue in our capital budget, and the plan was to build in multi-stall all gender bathrooms as part of those renovations, but the capital projects take a while. So we are scheduling a meeting with the consultant to see what we could do internally now for when we return to campus in the fall, and remain in compliance in terms of the building code that is a bit obsolete and does not really address this issue, but we have to stay in compliance, and having Ivana working with us is helping a lot. So I hope to have a further update at our next meeting, but we are making steady progress, and everybody seems pleased with where we are at this point.
Terrific. Thank you, Alan. Are there questions for Alan on any of these or other matters? Appreciate that update, Alan.
Okay, you're welcome.
We'll turn to the Governance Committee. I believe there is a report out from Governance, which met. Tammy, you chair that committee?
I do chair that committee. Thanks, Michelle. So this week, the Governance Committee met to consider 2 items. Tony Thomas is going to present the first item, and I'm going to present the second item. But before we get to the details of these, I thought it would be important for me to read from the Policy Council bylaws so that it's clear to everyone what it is that the Governance Committee is charged with doing. So let me read this to you. The Governance Committee shall serve as a screening committee for the Policy Council in matters involving governance, and shall make recommendations with respect to adjudication of conflicts or problems in the areas of governance referred to the Policy Council. It shall serve as a supervisory body for the implementation of changes in governance. So you'll see later why this is relevant, and I'll probably have to come back and quote it again, but I just wanted to preface our conversation with that clarity of what our role is. So with that, I'm going to ask Tony if you could bring the first item of discussion to the group, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tony Thomas. My apologies for my voice. I seem to have lost it. I will be discussing the amendment that was proposed and was circulated to the body by Zanera yesterday. The document is a PDF and the document is saved as Student Terms Amendment. It's a one-page document. In addition to that, there's an attachment which was circulated today by David from Student Government, which is the student resolution that's related to this. I'll do a brief introduction and then I'll allow David and Ethan to discuss this further. Basically, the students have proposed a revision to the governance plan in regards to student terms. Currently, students are selected for one-year terms, and there has been a proposed change to expand the length of their term from 1 year to 2 years for 2/3 of the student spots. So that's a basic overview. While you are pulling up the document to refer to, it's a one-page document. I'll allow David and Ethan to discuss more about where this resolution comes from and how it went through the student government process.
Thanks, Tony. David, you want to begin?
Yes, so basically, as many of you know, the faculty serve for 2 terms, the administration serves for however long they serve for, but the students only serve for a single year. And I know with me, it took me 2 or 3 meetings in order to get used to how the policy council works. And by that time, the term is basically over. We only have 6 meetings a year. So having a few senators that come back from the previous year, or having a few council members come back from the previous year, would be extremely helpful for the students to be able to push their agenda. It would also bring a lot more accountability to administrators in processes that take longer than a year to accomplish. That's the main point of it. What it does is it takes 6 seats that are student positions. 3, they will be appointed 2-year terms, 3 each year, so that 3 people will be coming back from the previous year and 3 people will be serving the following year. So every single administration between the USG and GSO, in addition to the 2 presidents, will appoint an additional 5 people, 3 for 2-year terms and 2 for 1-year terms.
Anything else, David? You good? Ethan, do you want to add anything?
No, I think David pretty much covered it.
Okay, great. Is there, Tony, let me circle back to you. Do you have anything else you want to add before there's a dialogue on this?
No, we try to provide in the document very clearly what the current language of the governance plan is. It's Article 1A3. And then we also included what the proposed language is. And you'll notice that the proposed language includes the addition of a new subclause C.
So I appreciate the clarity of the documents that were submitted this time around. So thank you to all who worked on that. Let's open this up for discussion. Ron, you've got your hand up.
So I question why this is being brought to Policy Council, because according to the USG Constitution, the authority to appoint to Policy Council sits with the president. And so the president for that current year makes appointments for that year in which that president resides. Also, student government has term limits of 1 year, which is why the Policy Council limits are 1 year. So student government actually does not have the authority to make 2-year appointments. If Policy Council decides that they want the student reps to be 2-year appointments, then Policy Council would then have to make the decision to select those positions, because they could do that, as happens with other committees where there are students appointed for multiple years that student government don't select. So you kind of have to refer back to your student government document.
So is there a comment on that in response to Ron?
So as per the USG Constitution, this shouldn't affect GSO because the 2-year term positions would all be USG positions. As per the USG Constitution, the positions interior to USG, so Senate positions and committee positions within USG, are only 1-year terms. As for positions outside USG, so Brooklyn College committees, which Policy Council would be included, those would be governed by the governing documents of that committee, which is why this amendment is being brought to the Policy Council, because it's a change to the Brooklyn College governance plan, which requires the approval of the Policy Council.
Ron? Oh, I'm sorry, Ethan?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I know it's a policy council. Okay, what was I gonna say? I know, so USG has our own rules about how we, like what David's saying was how we choose people internal to our USG, but yeah, he's also right that we do not choose how long someone is to stay in the policy council. So it's just a matter of like making it easier for us that like if we appoint someone for 2 years, we wouldn't have to worry about at least 3 of those positions. So, and yes, I know like what you're saying about the power of the president, but that's okay. Like the president still has that power to remove those people if he or she doesn't like them or they don't like them. So if that's the case, like the power still is exactly the same. The only difference is how policy council accepts the student appointments, because right now they only accept it for 1 term and they have to hear it from the new president for all those new positions. But what we're changing it to is that, okay, we already, like the policy council already knows who at least 3 of them are, and then they're expecting the next 3 to be appointed. And then of course at any time, if those 3 resign or they're no longer students, they'd be removed from the policy council, and then the president can like just fill the position up. And essentially it would work the exact same way as the faculty works and as the administration works, because the faculty is elected, but the administration appointed by our president, and upon them being removed from that position, the president would just have to reappoint. And so the fact that students only have 1 year to actually get their agenda across and work on the things they want to work on, that's like debilitating to the students. So to have an equal term and equal representation on the policy council is really important for us.
Fascinating. Ron, do you want to respond?
Sure. So let's use faculty council as an example. Faculty council elects the faculty that sits on policy council. Policy council does not elect the faculty members that sit on policy council. So the authority has been given to the faculty council to select the faculty, to the administration to select the administration, and to the students. Faculty council has authority to do multi-year appointments because they're going to be there for multiple years. Students don't have that authority because they are 1-year appointments. In terms of the continuity of information, that's something that student government needs to look at in terms of how are you transitioning incoming positions to these various committees to make sure that they're up to speed. And that's across the board, you know? So right now, every student government appointed position is for 1 year. And you can talk to your judge that he raises this every year, that there's been issues every year. So I think that's something that student government definitely needs to look at to figure out how to improve it. But in terms of 2-year terms, you don't have the authority to do that unless you want to cede the authority of selecting students to policy council to the policy council.
So Mobina was next.
I get that sort of student elected terms are 1 year, but as Aaron said, if those beyond the presidents, the students who serve on policy council don't have to be student government members, they're just appointed by student government, then the question of term limits or how long the term is doesn't come up, because those people don't have to necessarily, in other words, they're not being appointed because they're student government members. They're being appointed because they're chosen by student government. And that's
chosen by the president. The president has the authority, the current president has the authority to select the appointments. The current president.
But the person who's appointed to policy council doesn't have to be a member of student government.
That's
so you're
correct.
saying that since the president's term is only 1 year, they can only appoint somebody to this committee for 1 year.
Correct, because the power sits with the president.
Property.
Let me just clarify, because I think that I've seen this. This is a really helpful point, Mobina. I think I've seen this issue come around, and that is a question of whether or not this year's student government leadership can bind the assignment for the following year. That may be, I don't know if that's what's partly behind this or not. I'm gonna call on you, Ethan, after Yadidja, because he had his hand up first. Yadidja?
Yes, so I'm torn here because I think what the student government is asking for is 100% okay. I think they should do that. I was actually going to ask Tony to weigh in on the legality of this. And of course, each president can, as they pointed out, is allowed to fire the person next year. So actually, they're not bound by it. So
That's interesting.
I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the argument that they make. I think makes sense. I would ask Tony, okay, to say whether in fact there is such a concept of you get appointed 1 year, okay, and you're going to sit for 2 years, and then you can be fired by the previous one, and whether that's still ongoing. I don't know if in the United States government there's such a thing where that happens, but I think that would be a legal issue. I see what Ron is raising, but I like what the students want to do. I have another suggestion. Why don't the students change their governance that they should get elected for 2 years instead of for 1 year? Why is the president only for 1 year? It seems to me before you get your job done, you're already starting electioneering for the next year. Why don't you guys get yourself elected for 2 years at a time or 3 years at a time, whatever? Well, 3 years you'll be graduating, hopefully. But 2 years, I mean, no politician takes a job for 1 year. I mean, they spend all their life politicking and do nothing. Here they take the job for 6 years and they still do nothing. But I mean, at least in the real point here, I think you guys should look to change your constitution. So you should be elected for 2 years. I see nothing wrong with that.
So let's take this opportunity, pivot to Ethan. I see Aaron's hand up. Tony, do you also want to get in on this?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's going to go Ethan, Tony, then Aaron. Ethan?
Yes, okay. You're not wrong. 1 year is difficult for sure. But we have to make do of it. And that's a great point of what you raised about like changing the internal USG laws. That's very true. We possibly could do that. But first, like right now, what's on the table is just trying to work on this policy council, because it is the policy council bylaws that say that it's a 1 year term. And I was just going to say again, like what you just said, the president has the discretion to fire the next year, so you're not bound by anything. Every term can choose all 6 if they want, but it makes it easier on them if they only have to choose 3, because they already have 3, like let's say outstanding student leaders who they know and they can trust to sit on this policy council and do a good job at representing students. So yeah, you're not bound by anything, and yeah, I don't think you're really ceding any sort of power. And I don't really know what the U.S. government does too, but I do know that this is a little different. I mean, we're just students trying to get the voice of students out there. I don't know exactly like how it's done, but this is what we're asking for, because this is what we feel would make our voice stronger as students.
So I just want to weigh in on, before we turn to Tony, and then I see Aaron and then Ron, I just want to weigh in that I think this does enhance the voice of students, this proposal. And I think that's a good thing. I think we see across the board that Policy Council is a challenging committee to try to understand from the get-go. I think the question that I don't hear anyone saying that substantively this is a bad idea yet. They may say that eventually in terms of raising, in terms of allowing students to serve for 2 years. I think the question posed is how? By what mechanisms do we make these changes? Next up was Tony.
So I actually had a question for Ethan and David. I believe this has gone through some sort of student government review process, because it looks like it's some sort of resolution. Can you talk more about that? Are you intending to modify the bylaws? Because the bylaws do articulate certain student government office positions. And could there be a way that the bylaws of student government are revised vis-a-vis a vote of the legislature of student government, so that the policy council document doesn't have to be revised? It's the student government document that's revised.
So to answer that, sorry, Ethan, you want to go?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Okay, so the Brooklyn College Governance Plan does not allow us to appoint 2-year positions, because Article 1, Section A, subsection 3B states that additional students to be selected annually in a manner determined by the student governments. Because it states selected annually, and that's the word that we're looking to change, that specific line. We cannot have them serve for 2-year positions. Now, the reason that it's presented in the form of a resolution is because per Article 8 of the Brooklyn College Governance Plan. Now, if you don't have it, let me send the link to the chat. Per Article 8 of the Brooklyn College Governance Plan, amendments to this governance plan may be initiated by any constituent body. Now, USG is a constituent body, and it did approve this amendment. So it is officially an initiated amendment, but in order to actually be passed, this amendment does have to be passed by the Policy Council, does have to be approved by the Brooklyn College president, and does have to be approved by the Board of Trustees. So this is an official, nominated, or a proposed amendment.
Thank you. Tony, did you have anything else?
No, I think that's helpful for us to understand the context for why student government is pushing for a revision, because they feel like without revising Policy Council governing document first, they cannot go to make a change in any sort of bylaws of the student government, because student government is articulating that they do not have the authority to expand the term without Policy Council's approval.
So I just want to say that David put a link in the chat, but we also have these documents circulated to you. Zunera circulated the documents themselves to you so that you can look at both the local bylaws of the Policy Council and also the Brooklyn College Governance Plan that's approved by CUNY Central. There are some interesting points of both that are probably going to come up in this meeting. Next up is Aaron.
Hi. So, yeah, I just quickly wanted to talk about what Yedidia said about the 1-year terms that we have by default in all student government. So we all know that students, well, I mean, if we don't all know, then most students at the moment in student government are usually seniors, usually juniors, and it's very surprising when you see a student who is actually a sophomore, which is why it's very hard to actually put 2-year terms for most positions in student government. However, when you have only one specific committee and the most important committee, I feel like it's going to be very easy actually to put a 2-year term specifically on that committee. And especially that it's not everyone on the committee, it's only a certain amount of people on that committee that we're going to be putting. It helps for the continuity because you can see over here, David, this is not his first time on the Policy Council. And you can see that he's more well-versed, he knows what's going on. In this administration with Ethan, we opened a WhatsApp group and we communicate before the meeting. So we are more prepared to know what USG passed, but we have no guarantee that that's going to happen next year. And this kind of like having someone for 2 years who can help out the new people, the new elected students, that can help a lot with that. And we can't do it in the rest of the student government because, yeah, that's going to be too many positions. And in regards to what Tony said, this was passed in student government in the Senate and in the cabinet. The main argument for passing it was it's going to help with actually passing information in a better way, and especially that it's giving the power to the president to actually remove someone in case they don't attend. We feel like that's an important thing to make sure that everybody's on the same side over here and that we're working together for the greater good.
Thank you, Aaron. I just want to underscore something that's emerged in this dialogue, and that is that the request is not for all positions to be 2-year positions. The request is for a portion of them to be 2-year positions and to be staggered, that is rotated every other year, which I think is really interesting and smart in the sense of an attempt to try to get continuity of understanding over time, but also allow for a rotation and an equal bite at the apple, as it were, for the next student government administration that comes in. Okay, Ron, you were next.
Yeah. So you're actually taking power away from the president. So this could pass Policy Council. And if it does, USG has to go back and do a constitutional amendment because now the president does not have the authority to appoint the positions for their current year. David, you also made a point you can do multi-year appointments. As you said, David is one of those. You just need to communicate that with the presidents. So instead of having that incoming president fire somebody, student government should say, hey, here's a cadre of people who are willing to return on policy council. Can you select from these? They already have the skills. So it's really about student government going back and looking at your own documents to try to solve your issue. Policy council just needs to know who you select. If you decide to have an internal process to say, hey, for policy council, in order to qualify, you've had to be there a year before, the year prior, or have had to be on there for the past years. If you put that into the student government governing documents, then that's the process that student government has to follow. Going this particular route, policy council now has the authority that you're taking away from the president. And I don't know if you want to do that for future presidents. That's totally up to you.
So just to sharpen the focus of what the dispute, I think, is, and let me make sure we all understand it. I think you're suggesting, Ron, that student government should, at least as a matter of first principles, go back and manage and reform their own bylaws. And that this matter either shouldn't come to policy council or should only come to policy council after that's been completed. Did this did this resolution garner a majority vote, Tony, from the governance committee?
The governance committee agreed that this should go to the body. So that's the authority we have, is whether it's a screening authority.
Yeah.
So whether we determine, yeah. So it did pass.
Okay, you're next. You're on mute.
I should know better by now. I'm very much persuaded by the student argument. And I actually have a direct question to Tony. If we vote to pass the students' resolution, will you advise the president that it is a legal document?
President, hold on a sec. Which president? Student government president or?
No, you.
President?
No, Michelle, you will, because after all, you have to take it on. So I'm wondering, Ron makes a case, which is a technical case, and I understand what he's coming from.
Yeah.
What I want to know is if we all agree that the student government thing should be approved, will Tony, based on the legality, advise the president it's legal, you should send it on, or no, hold on to it until the students go back and change their own constitution? And that's one question. And just a comment, it is true that once upon a time when students graduated in bulk in 4 years, they weren't around long enough. But the fact, to our dismay, is that many students are here for 5 or 6 years. So I think you could probably find plenty of people to run for student government who are going to be here for 2 years from the time they get elected. I would urge you to do that. I think that's important. You waste too much time electioneering and not enough time doing the stuff that you want to do. But that's just an aside comment. But anyway, I want Tony, if he would respond or decline to respond. I don't know.
Yes. So I think there's a sequencing issue here. I do agree that ultimately student government does have to amend their bylaws in order to make it go into full effect. Student government has raised the concern that they don't think they have the authority to do so, and they passed a resolution to indicate their desire for a policy council change, and I would say indicate support of such a change. So it almost seems like we have 2 steps to do. One would be to revise the policy council bylaws, and then revise the student government bylaws, and then that, in addition with the joint resolution, would all get sent to the board of trustees for approval. But I do think we have to do both. Policy council alone is not sufficient, and so I think it needs to be both of them.
But it sounds like the student government is waiting for policy council, or would like consent from policy council in order to do this, in order to move forward with its own bylaw revisions. In other words, we could pass this. What Yadidja points out is that the president, that is me, the president of Brooklyn College, has the authority to hold something, either send it to the Board of Trustees, not send it to the Board of Trustees. There's a final approval process, and I could place this on hold while the student government managed its revisions and then took them both to the Board of Trustees. Next up is Alan. Alan, you're on mute.
Yeah,
Ron,
okay,
can you
got it.
lower your hand?
Yeah. Okay. Well, while I like the concept of having a student there for 2 years, David as an example, I agree with Ron. I think it should be 1-year appointments. The new president has a right to extend someone like they did with David for the second year. Also, students may not want to serve 2 years. They may want to serve 1 year in student government and maybe do an internship the second year. And we may be limiting students' involvement if they have to commit to 2 years. 2 years is a long time, especially a year like now. I think what Ron suggested gives all the options open to people. I think it's just a little cleaner and doesn't involve changing so many rules and then making the next student government president have to deal with so many actions that were already approved beforehand.
So one question that's really helpful, Alan, in terms of clarifying the distinction between the two positions we're assessing here. One question that Yadidja asks in the chat is, does the student government intend to revise its own constitution or bylaws in order to, in response to the discussion here, presuming this resolution passed here? Yeah, Ethan?
So yes, of course we can change our own bylaws. Absolutely. It would be very easy, take a week. But we, at least from my personal experience, I've gone through the process of trying to change USG. In fact, trying to change from CLAS to USG, and it was problematic, to say the least. And where I went through all of the government steps first, and I introduced all the different things that I could in government. Lo and behold, oh wait, no, Ethan, you can't do any of that. You actually have to go through Policy Council first. And then you have to go to the governance committee of the Policy Council first.
Right.
And then once that's approved, then it goes to Policy Council,
Right.
then it has to go to President Michelle Henderson, and then it goes to Board of Trustees. So we know the process. And we're more than happy and willing to change our own bylaws, and we have done it multiple times. But we know that if it's a bylaw, if it's changing the Policy Council bylaws, that's what we have to do. We have to change the Policy Council bylaws. And President Michelle Henderson asked about the mechanisms earlier, and these are the mechanisms. We are going through the proper channels and mechanisms to do it. So,
thank you for that, Ron.
So a couple questions. You're making it much harder for yourself. Policy Council has given authority to student government to select the representatives. If you decide that you want to do 2-year appointments, we don't need to know about that. We just need the list every year, right? You don't have to go to Policy Council for that because Policy Council is giving authority to you. That's another point. The other point, if this document, the document as written can't move forward because you also have to think about GSO. The students are appointed proportionally. In your document, you list a hard number 6, right? So that assumes that USG is always going to have 6 seats on Policy Council, which you cannot assume. It has to be proportional to the number of people that sit on the faculty side as well as on the staff side. So you can't have that hard number in that document.
Thank you, Ron. I think there is basic agreement that having some students serve 2-year terms would enhance student government's voice and the students generally, their voice here at Policy Council. And I think there is general agreement that that is a good thing. I think there is a dispute about sequencing of process, number one, and then a dispute about whether or not the Policy Council bylaws should be changed or whether that undermines some of the authority and flexibility that student government has right now. So are there additional comments about this matter? Are there any closing thoughts from any student representative in response to Ron's articulation that there's a concern about undermining student authority and flexibility? All right.
So I'll take this then.
Sure, David, go ahead.
So yeah, Ethan mentioned before the fact that when USG was being created, things had to go through the Policy Council and through the Board of Trustees, through the official services, through the official process. And it's the same thing here. We want to make sure
that everything gets done official by the book, but it doesn't lock us up. Students can leave. Students can leave in the middle of the year. What happens if a student decides they want to graduate in December? They can't. Of course, they could leave in the middle of the year. It gives the president of USG the flexibility to remove students who either aren't up to their full potential or are acting in contrast to the way that USG was formed or USG was elected to do in that specific year. But it also solves the real problem that could exist if a student who is elected the president of USG is not someone who previously served in the before. And that's very likely to happen. We have a lot of times where students run who are leaders of organizations, not leaders of USG. They don't know the ropes. They don't know things like that. And I can tell you, and not just me, but the administrators here and the faculty members here know how difficult it is to get things done when the students are not appointed in a timely manner. So all this does is it makes it from, okay, like me, when Ethan got elected, I had to go to Ethan and say, hey, I want to rejoin policy council. Could you appoint me to that? But it would make it automatically the opposite where, okay, this person would come back and serve unless removed. This way we could have some kind of continuity for the student government, but not bind the student government by it. As for how this will affect GSO, now, as it stands right now, GSO has 3 representatives, but which is 30% of the student representatives, but they only have 15.5% of the student body. So it's not always proportional. It doesn't have to be proportional, and nowhere in the Brooklyn College governance plan does it say it should be proportional. It says as decided by the students. And the way that the student governments this year decided to do it was to give 3 seats to GSO and 7 seats to USG. Now, what this would do is it would put a minimum of 7 USG seats. That is true. It would do that. But does that mean that it would in any way hinder the ability of any student government to have their representation? Not at all, because this policy does mandate that each student government have representation.
All right, I think we're going to go ahead, unless there is additional dialogue, I feel like it is time to call this question and to put this to a vote. One quick question is, Zunera, do we have the capacity to poll vote this? Okay, Zunera is going to post a poll vote. And only those members, only those voting members of Policy Council are to vote on this matter. If you are a voting member of Policy Council, this will be in favor of the students' resolution or opposed to the students' resolution.
This is not anonymous, right?
David, there's 2 screens for you. I don't know. Sorry.
Poll is not anonymous, correct?
It says anonymous as the voting that is done by poll and faculty council.
Right,
It
so
is,
it's not anonymous.
it's a matter.
You get the list.
Yes, we know who's a voting member of the Policy Council and who's not.
Because there can't be anonymous votes by law.
We are aware. Zunera, have you closed the poll? Nope. Everybody vote. You got now or let's go ahead and close it, see where we are.
Okay, I am closing it now. Okay, 18 people voted yes, 7 voted no, 2 abstained.
All right. So that motion passes. There is a second matter that Governance Committee wanted to report out on. Tammy?
Yeah, thank you. So the second item that came to us was not a proposal related to the area of governance. It was a request for a policy change. And if you remember what I said at the top of my reporting out, The governance committee screens for issues related to governance. So we had a lengthy discussion regarding our role and how to respond to this request for a policy change. And we were not sure that it was our place to screen the policy proposal, given the bylaws that say that we should screen things, quote, in the area of governance. So we had a lot of conversation about this. And in the end, we decided to bring the issue, this question, and a possible resolution to the body of Policy Council. And so we essentially thought that there are two options for how proposals for policy changes should be screened, okay? So the first option we thought of was to expand the governance committee's role to include screening in the area of policy to be added to the area of governance, which is already our role. That's the first option. The second option that we came up with was to actually create a new policy committee, which would be charged with screening and refining policies before they're brought to the body of the Policy Council. So we would like to discuss that with the council, and hopefully you're able to follow. So basically, we got a proposal. It was for a policy change. We said, we're not in charge of policy changes. We're in charge of governance changes. So we don't think we should be looking at this. But then when we looked at the bylaws more generally, we basically came up with this question of, well, who should be vetting, who should be screening policies before they come to the council? And that's how we came up with those two possible options. So expand the governance committee's role or create a new policy committee that screens items before it comes to this body.
So go ahead, Tammy.
Well, I just want to see, it's a little complicated. It's very detailed. And so I wanted to open just by saying, do people have questions about this?
So comments about this? I think the upshot is that the governance committee believes that there's a bit of a hole in our committee structure where there is no committee specifically tasked with reviewing Brooklyn College policy that is not a change of the governance of the bylaws themselves.
Exactly.
And so this is the position of the governance committee. And the question is whether or not to change the scope and authority of the governance committee to include policies, or to start a new policy committee, or to do something else, to make another committee able to review policies. Do we have comments or thoughts about this? Tony?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important that we do have a group that reviews policies before it comes to policy committee. I think personally that the governance committee could be the group that does this. It could be expanded. The governance committee currently has equal representation from faculty, staff, from faculty, students, and administration. So I think it's the proper body, as well as the folks who are on that committee are versed in understanding governance. And so expanding it to include policy revisions, I think makes sense.
Other thoughts about this? So this is not a time right now when we're going to, this would take either a change in the jurisdiction and authority of the governance committee, or the development of a new committee would take a change in the bylaws of Policy Council, where the committee structure is articulated. So this is not a moment in which we are going to make those changes. This is a survey of what do you think? Where should jurisdiction and authority to change policies reside? I think that's the question posed. Yadidja?
And that's correct. And either which way we decide, it has to go back to the governance committee because it's going to require a change in governance. And
absolutely.
Then for a vote governance. I did put a note on the chat, I don't know if you saw it, reminding everyone that according to the general construction law of New York State, a vote has to be by a majority of the members, not the seated members, but the total members. And I don't remember what the numbers Zunera read out, but sort of, as much as I want this thing to pass, I don't think, I'm not sure, but I don't think it may have had the real majority that we needed. It's not simple. It's not an 8 versus 7 versus 2. It's got to be a real majority. And do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. So how many people sit this semester on policy council? How many total people sit?
It's how many people sit this semester. It's how many people are in the total of policy council, whether they're seated or not. That's what the general.
Yeah. How many people are on policy council this year, Zunera? I thought it was either 30 or 32.
Well, how many does each constituent group have?
It's
Well,
30.
each
10, 10, 10. It's 30. And we had 18 in favor. It's a majority.
What? If there are 30 people, okay, a majority according to construction law would be half of 30 plus 1 would be 16 people.
We had 18 votes in favor.
Right.
Okay, I didn't remember the numbers. If you had 18 votes in favor, then that's correct.
18 votes in favor. All right, let's circle back to the question at hand, which is where should the authority to assess policy changes that do not revise the governance documents reside? Should it reside in an expanded jurisdiction of governance, or should it reside in a brand new committee or somewhere else? We've got a couple comments on this. Alan.
Sure. I agree with what Tony said. I think I'd recommend that we expand the governance committee. I was in policy council, long time, and we used to have so many committees, and the committees never met because it's the same people pretty much doing all the work. That's why my committee, fiscal, infrastructure, and planning, used to be 3 different committees, and they hardly ever met. And so I think this policy should be included with the governance committee. I think it just makes it more streamlined and more efficient.
Thanks for that comment, Mobina.
I had a question, and actually this came up in the very helpful governance information set that you did earlier today. I don't know who has ultimate decision-making over policy. Like in terms of as a curriculum and all of that we know, but in terms of policy, it seems like it rests with the president and everyone else has an advisory role, right? So, okay. So then so if the governance committee takes on advising on policy, that's okay. Got it. Thank you.
Right, and I take the policy council's responsibility as including advising the president not only on strict governance changes, but a whole range of policy related changes, things that we've talked about, bathroom signs, for instance, kind of a more expansive jurisdiction. This is the only body at Brooklyn College that includes student representation. So I think it's important to understand the jurisdiction of what's possible at Policy Council fairly broadly. Yadidja.
I agree with Alan. We have too many committees. Just making more committees is not helpful. Let's simply ask the governance committee to recommend back to Policy Council that they change their name from governance committee to governance and policy committee, and that they will screen governance and policy issues and bring them back to fact. I would move that become we expand the role of the governance committee and we send this back to governance to bring it back to us as a governance document.
So I believe that side of the argument has been fully articulated. Oh, Namalinda, you've got your hand up.
For some reason, I thought Tony said, in the document as it stands, this is part of your role to screen. It's just that it has never been realized. Did I get it wrong?
Yes, you got it wrong. It says screen of governance.
I am talking to Tony. Thank you very much.
I thought you were talking to me.
Thank
Tony?
you.
The bylaw says that for the governance committee, our role is to screen proposals in the area of changes to governance. which the committee is saying is separate from policy. So if what I'm hearing is people saying, so what we need to say is that role of that committee is to screen in the area of governance and policy. So that would be a change from what it currently states. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Namalanda. So is there anyone who would like to articulate a different position than essentially expanding the jurisdiction of the governance committee?
Yeah, I have a question on that. Sorry.
No, go ahead, David, and then Ethan.
When we talk about policies, wouldn't the policy of each, depending on what it's going for, come out of that specific committee? So if it's let's say a fiscal or infrastructure policy, it would come out of that committee. If it's a faculty student relations, it would come out of that committee. So I'm having trouble understanding exactly which policy changes would come out of the governance committee that wouldn't fall into those other committees.
Whoa, we've got a lot of feedback. I think that's a great question. And there's a difference. Oh, actually, Tony, you were going to explain.
Yeah, so the way I envision it is each of those subcommittees can develop policy that they think reflects the issue that the committee determined that there needed to be a policy on. They would then submit that draft policy to the governance committee. The governance committee is making sure that the policy conforms with the board of trustee guidelines and making sure that it doesn't advocate any authority from another body. So they're looking at it more holistically versus the contents of the policy may be created by a different subcommittee. So the policy committee is not necessarily the committee that's creating policy, they're reviewing policy.
So I think that's helpful. Ethan, did you have anything else?
That is helpful. I was just going to probably suggest instead of the governance committee, it be the executive committee, because all policies go through that committee anyway. And that's how we just, I would say the executive committee because all policies go through anyway. So, but it doesn't really matter to me. I am in favor of expanding the roles of an already existing committee for sure.
Great. So I think there's a general will of the body on that matter. Unless there are burning comments. Actually, Namalanda, you haven't spoken much. Go ahead.
I did speak before this, but
I know, but I just want to make sure that people, just in general, if people speak very frequently, I'm less likely to call on them. If they speak more infrequently, I'm likely to call on them. So once, this is your twice, go ahead.
So if we go back to the example of what we've just been discussing now, does that mean that over and above what we've talked about, it will go back again to governance to then approve or not approve?
So that's a really good question. If, say, something comes out of facilities, say there is something comes out of the facilities committee that says, we really want a multi-stall, non-gendered bathroom, at least one in each building. That is a request of the campus, but it is not a change of official policy written anywhere. And so that would come directly out of the committee to the full body. If it were a change in written policy, or a change in some kind of policy, I think it's Tony's position that should go to the Governance and Policy Review Committee. Wanted to make sure, though, that I'm not speaking out of turn. That's my understanding of what you're saying, Tony.
Yeah, that's correct. And also, just for context for folks, we don't change many policies here at Policy Committee, or even Policy Council. We talk about a lot of issues. We talk a lot about procedures, but when it comes to actual policies, there's not that many that come through for this body to review. And so that's why it's important that there is a subcommittee that does do a thorough review. And if it's necessary that needs to be a modification, they can go back with the body to change any modifications before it comes to this group, which may result in a longer delay if there needs to be significant changes. So the idea is that by the time it came to Policy Council, it's ready for a vote, ready to go.
But Tony, again, going back to what we've discussed today, what is going to happen? Is it going to come back to you?
Oh, yeah, so funny.
Is what I'm
Yes.
asking.
Yeah, because this would result in a governance change, governance committee would have to review it back. So it would be referred back to the governance committee to develop language, to revise the bylaws, to expand the scope of governance committee. That would then be voted on by the full policy council to expand the authority of governance committee. But yes, Melinda, it is a little bit of a back and forth for to get this changed.
So in this particular case, sorry to appear redundant here, but in this particular case, we're saying, yes, we're going to expand your powers, and then we'll wait for that to get approved before then you look at what the students are proposing to approve it. I mean, which comes first, the chicken or the egg here?
I agree with you. That's why I agree. I understand your frustration. Yes, that is, in the end, that's what has to happen, because the governance committee did not feel like they had the authority. So they want to be given the authority in order to review the policy. They did not feel that they did not have the authority to do it, so they did not review it.
Right, thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. I think that colloquy was helpful. Do you have any last thoughts on this?
I was just going to say that I agree with you and with a legal authority here that, in fact, the policy council won't decide whether the policy should be passed or not. It simply will say whether the policy is legal and should come back for all of our votes. And in fact, that's the role of the executive committee. And the executive committee decides whether things should go straight to policy council, or they should first go to the governance committee, or they should first go to the fiscal committee. The executive committee, all that they do is make up the agenda. Okay, we don't decide on the validity of any of the proposals. We make an agenda. So
yeah, but the committees make recommendations about whether something should be taken to the full body.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're all on the same page. There does not need to be a vote. This was simply a discussion to express the will of the body about the preference around this. So Tammy, is there anything else coming out of the governance committee?
That's all. So we will take this back to committee and we'll bring something to our next policy council to vote on.
Great. I would ask all the committees to meet if there are issues that are in front of you. And if you're not sure, feel free to reach out to the executive committee to see if there are issues that are kicking around that you'd like to chew on at the committee level. Is there any old business we need to talk about? Any new business? Yes, Sophia.
So I've been speaking to a lot of students in NBS, and one of the things that is a common theme, especially for the freshman students, is a lack of orientation for majors. So the students would like, within each department, that there is an orientation, when they declare their majors, that there is an orientation that they would be able to find out, I guess, things that they should know that will help them through the process of, navigating the many layers of their majors. So right now, I don't believe there is anything like that, and they would like to have that.
So this is an issue of wanting to orient the students to the majors as they declare a major. Mark?
Yeah, just a comment. With the online declaration of major system, we lost the routine meetings between faculty and students when they needed to get the form signed. As a department, we actually insisted that we would not approve online declarations of major until they came in, and we have a worksheet we go over with the students. So we actually make sure they leave with a 4-year schedule that tells them when they have to take specific courses and documentation, a number of other things. And I think it's not a full-fledged orientation, but it seems to work reasonably well. They have some sense, at least, of when they need to take given courses and what they should be worried about.
So I do think that this is an interesting matter. Sophia has raised this issue, this concern. Mark has raised some alternatives that may be out there in the various departments. I think that the appropriate body to evaluate this is the Faculty Student Relations Committee, to take into account some of these competing models and to make a recommendation to the full body about these matters. Are there any I'm trying to follow the chat as well, but can't quite follow it. There must be a joke going on in the chat. A number of people are laughing. That's great. So are there any, my sense is to go ahead and send this with your consent, Sophia, or your agreement that this is something that's worth analyzing, and have the Faculty Student Relations Committee take it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So we'll ask that committee to meet before the March meeting. Is there any other new business? All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. You did your moves. Is there a second? All those in favor? Thanks, y'all. Have a great month. See you next month.
Bye.
Mary,
Thanks,
you wanna
everyone.
stay for a second?